This is urgent breaking news. Something very unusual just happened in Washington, D.C., and it could shake the entire foundation of the American government. In the past few hours, many top officials at the White House have quit their jobs all at once. They did this to show they strongly disagree with President Donald J. Trump, who is firmly refusing to leave office, even though he is facing serious legal problems and growing political pressure. This is not just another messy day during Trump's second term as president. This looks like a complete breakdown happening right before everyone's eyes, and it could push the country into a level of disorder never seen before. The main event is about a group of high-ranking White House officials, including important cabinet members and advisors, who have all turned in their resignation letters at the same time. The reason is clearly about President Trump. He refused to follow a ruling that the Supreme Court made earlier today. That ruling said he must give up certain presidential powers that are connected to ongoing investigations. Those investigations are looking into whether he interfered with elections and mishandled secret government documents during his earlier time in politics. The decision to resign was made in a private emergency meeting held late at night in the White House Situation Room, just a short time ago. Several sources close to the administration have confirmed this. These are not low-level workers walking away. These are some of the most powerful people in the government, including the Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, and several deputy secretaries from major departments like the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security. Their resignation letters were quickly leaked to big news organizations. The letters say the officials have differences with the president that cannot be fixed, specifically about his refusal to follow the law. The letters also say the officials are afraid that if they keep working for him, they would be helping him break the Constitution. One especially strong letter came from the acting Attorney General. It says that the president's refusal to obey the court ruling puts national security at risk and tears apart the very government institutions that these officials promised to protect. This kind of thing does not happen during normal political disagreements. It only happens when trust in the president and the executive branch completely falls apart. It shows that things have gone from simple disagreement to an actual breakdown of how the government is supposed to work. These officials used to put up with the difficult and unpredictable nature of Trump's presidency, but they have now lost patience. Instead of trying to work around him, they are now trying to force him to follow the law. People inside Washington say this group resignation was actually planned over the past week, after several failed attempts to convince the president to change his mind. Making things even worse, the Republican Party itself is sending a very unusual signal. Former allies of Trump and insiders in the Republican Party are no longer defending him with the same energy they showed during past problems. The silence from important people like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Mike Johnson is very noticeable. Their offices have only put out statements saying no comment, and that silence says a lot. Privately, party leaders are described as being in a state of panic. Many of them are scrambling to do damage control and trying to distance themselves from the mess. The public loyalty that was once a key part of Trump's control over the party has been replaced by careful, cautious behavior and quiet disappearances from events and endorsements connected to him. The political meaning of all this is obvious. They can see what is about to happen, and they think it could be a disaster that would badly hurt the Republican Party in the upcoming midterm elections and beyond. One senator who did not want to be named told reporters privately, "We've reached the point where surviving means cutting ties with Trump, not standing by him even harder." This betrayal is a major turning point. The insiders who once benefited from Trump's popularity with voters are now choosing to save themselves rather than stay loyal to him. As the night goes on, the legal consequences and the shift in power are already moving forward quickly. This mass resignation sets off enforcement steps that are built into federal government rules. These include possible contempt charges against the president for not following court orders. The possible outcomes now include arrest warrants being issued if Trump continues to shut himself inside the Oval Office. There is also the possibility that the remaining cabinet members could use the 25th Amendment to remove him, although that process is very complicated now because so many cabinet positions are empty. The government could also seize his assets or freeze executive branch bank accounts if the investigations get more serious. This could lead to a showdown over the Constitution that has never happened before in American history. Each step now forces the next one because of legal requirements and automatic processes built into the system. The Supreme Court's ruling, which was confirmed after an appeal was denied earlier today, requires Trump to immediately hand over certain documents. His refusal to do so has started a chain reaction. Congress is coming back for an emergency session tomorrow. Democrats are pushing to file articles of impeachment, and even some Republicans are showing willingness to consider removing Trump from office. Behind the scenes, government institutions are working together and moving very fast, which suggests they believe Trump's ability to resist is getting weaker under the pressure. The current plan seems to be about containment. The goal is to cut the president off from his usual support systems while limiting the damage to the rest of the government's work. They want to control the story that the public hears, stop any desperate attempts by Trump to escape or grab more power, and lock everything into place before the situation gets even worse. This is still in the early stages of getting worse. People expect Trump to come out with angry public statements soon, maybe through a late-night post online or a surprise press conference from the Rose Garden, where he will attack what he calls deep state traitors and rigged courts. His legal team is probably about to file emergency requests with the courts, asking them to pause or reverse the ruling. Trump might also try to give orders to federal agencies, which would test whether regular government workers will obey him or the courts. Reactions from around the world are already coming in. Close allies like the United Kingdom and Canada have expressed worry about the stability of the United States. The fight has now moved from being about politics to being about enforcement, from words to actions, from loyalty to survival. What started as a legal disagreement has turned into a full-blown crisis. The area around the U.S. Capitol is buzzing with rumors that the Secret Service is getting ready for possible unrest. As the sun comes up over Washington, the streets around the White House are strangely quiet, but the tension in the air is thick, like the calm before a massive storm that could change the political world forever. Small groups of protesters have started to gather, holding signs that demand accountability. Meanwhile, security barriers are multiplying, which hints at fears that widespread chaos could break out if this standoff continues. Inside the White House, sources say President Trump is hiding out with only a small group of his most loyal supporters. They are trying to figure out what to do next, surrounded by empty offices and phones that nobody is answering. The sense of betrayal gets deeper as more information comes out about the rebellion happening inside the Republican Party. Senate Republicans, who used to be Trump's unbreakable shield during past impeachment trials and scandals, are now clearly splitting apart. Shocking reports from Capitol Hill say that a group of Republican insiders, including several members of the Judiciary Committee, held a secret meeting last night to talk about plans for what the party should do after Trump. This isn't about being disloyal. It's about saving the party from being completely destroyed. One person who was at the meeting leaked to a major news network. The silence from people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, who have always been loud in defending Trump, makes this shift even clearer. Their social media accounts, which are usually full of supportive posts, have gone quiet. This is basically an unspoken admission that things have changed. Private reactions among these insiders are full of panic. Journalists have gotten hold of emails and text messages that show frantic conversations about how to distance themselves from Trump. "We can't go down with the ship," reads one message from a senior aide. When these Republicans do make public statements, they use careful language like respect for the process instead of directly supporting Trump. This shows they are quietly leaving Trump's circle of influence. The political consequences are enormous, especially with the 2026 midterm elections coming up. Many people see this as the end of Trump's power over the party. The Republicans will either have to find new leaders or risk losing badly in elections. This turning point also makes the legal situation much worse for Trump, because each person who resigns removes another layer of protection around him. The Supreme Court's ruling came after a very long session that ended in a 6-3 decision against Trump. This ruling automatically sets off a series of legal steps required by federal law. Contempt charges are now unavoidable. The Justice Department, which is now being run by a temporary leader who follows normal government rules rather than political loyalty, is getting ready to file those charges. The possible results include taking control of assets connected to Trump's business empire, freezing his campaign money, or even issuing an arrest warrant if he refuses to obey an order to appear before Congress. The process of removing Trump from office is gaining support. Democrats in the House are writing up articles of impeachment for obstruction of justice. There are also quiet discussions among the remaining cabinet members about using the 25th Amendment. One expert on the Constitution said, "This is a showdown where the president's defiance crashes directly into the authority of the courts, and it could eventually require the military or law enforcement to step in." The legal system essentially runs itself at this point. Trump's refusal to comply forces government agencies to enforce the law, creating a chain reaction that could end with him being physically removed from the White House. What is happening behind the scenes paints a picture of careful, organized teamwork among government institutions. The FBI and Secret Service are reportedly on high alert, sharing information with the security teams that protect Congress in order to stop any out-of-control actions. The fact that all of this is happening so quickly and quietly suggests that these institutions all believe the same thing. Trump's ability to fight back is falling apart as he becomes more and more isolated from his former inner circle. The plan has several parts. First, containment, which means keeping the chaos limited to the executive branch. Second, isolation, which means cutting off Trump's ways of communicating and giving orders. Third, damage control, which means protecting the government's ongoing work, like budget discussions and foreign aid programs. The goals are clear. They want to control the public story by carefully leaking information that makes the resignations look like acts of patriotism rather than betrayal. They want to prevent Trump from escaping, whether that means fleeing the country or barricading himself in the White House. And they want to secure sworn statements from the people who resigned, which could be used as evidence in future trials. One insider described the whole effort as a precise surgical strike designed to remove the problem without bringing down the whole system. The situation keeps getting more intense with every hour that passes. Trump is expected to publicly fight back very soon. His aides say he is preparing a speech to the nation. He might skip traditional news channels and instead broadcast it directly on his Truth Social platform, where he will call everything a witch hunt, organized by extreme left-wing politicians and Republicans he considers traitors. His lawyers have already started filing emergency requests with the courts, arguing that the ruling should be overturned because of executive privilege. However, legal experts predict these requests will be quickly denied, since even the conservative-leaning judges have already taken a clear position. Trump might also try to issue orders telling federal employees to ignore the resignations and the court orders, which would test whether the government bureaucracy will listen to him or follow the law. Reactions from around the world are flooding in. European leaders from NATO countries are putting out statements expressing concern and asking for calm, while privately adjusting their diplomatic plans. Stock markets in Asia open nervously, and U.S. stock market futures are falling because investors are afraid of instability. The fight is changing from political strategy to actual enforcement, where words are being replaced by actions, and personal loyalty is giving way to the need for survival. As the day goes on, all eyes are on whether the officials who are still in their jobs will stay and hold firm or join the mass departure, which could push things toward complete government breakdown on Capitol Hill. The sun has barely come up over the National Mall, but the Capitol area already looks like a military fortress. Barricades line Pennsylvania Avenue. Capitol police officers in riot gear are standing shoulder to shoulder at every entrance, and helicopters are flying in low, threatening circles overhead. Inside the marble hallways, what started as quiet departures has blown up into an explosive revolt in the Senate. Republican senators are now openly turning against President Trump in scenes that longtime government workers say are the most chaotic since the Watergate scandal decades ago. The revolt came together this morning during a surprise closed-door meeting in the old Senate chamber. According to several people who were there and agreed to talk only if their names were not used, more than 12 Republican senators, many of whom had campaigned alongside Trump just months earlier, gave harsh and angry criticisms of his refusal to step down or obey the Supreme Court. Senator Susan Collins of Maine reportedly stood up first and said plainly, "The president's actions have crossed into dangerous territory that threatens the republic itself." Senator Mitt Romney spoke next. He read out loud parts of his own resignation letter from an earlier advisory position and called the current crisis a deliberate attack on the constitutional order. The betrayal hurts most coming from people who were once considered Trump's strongest supporters. Senator Josh Hawley, who famously raised his fist in a gesture of solidarity on January 6th, stayed noticeably quiet during the meeting, but later put out a one-sentence statement. The rule of law must prevail, even when it is politically inconvenient. Lindsey Graham, who has been one of Trump's loudest defenders for years, reportedly walked out of the meeting early and has not returned any calls from White House staff. Behind the scenes, party leaders whose job it is to keep everyone in line are desperately trying to stop a complete public split. But the damage has already been done. Leaked audio clips from the meeting reveal heated arguments in which senators accuse Trump of risking the country's future just to save himself. Public loyalty to Trump has disappeared almost overnight. The social media pages of Republican lawmakers are now filled with carefully chosen words about respecting the authority of the courts instead of the familiar phrases defending Trump against witch hunts or fake news. Several Republicans have already canceled events they were supposed to attend with Trump supporters, and fundraising emails that used to prominently feature Trump's name now leave it out completely. The quiet exit from Trump's side is speeding up. 3 more Republicans in the House of Representatives have announced they will not run for re-election, blaming the poisonous atmosphere created by this ongoing crisis. The political message is impossible to miss. They can see what is coming and are positioning themselves for a Republican Party after Trump, one that might still have a chance of winning seats in the quickly approaching midterm elections. This split within the party makes the legal consequences even more powerful. With cabinet-level officials gone and important government departments left without leaders, the temporary officials filling those roles are now forced to choose between being loyal to the president and being faithful to the Constitution. The Justice Department, which is now being run by a career government employee rather than a political appointee, has officially told the White House that contempt of court proceedings will begin within 48 hours unless Trump starts obeying the ruling. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. issued an order this afternoon telling Trump he must appear in person or face an arrest warrant. Legal scholars say this kind of order against a sitting president is almost unheard of. The possible outcomes now include not just contempt charges, but also the possible use of emergency removal procedures found in little-known parts of federal law that deal with presidential succession when a president is unable or unwilling to serve. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who is being pressured from all sides of his party, has scheduled an emergency meeting of the Rules Committee to consider speeding up articles of impeachment that focus on obstruction of justice and abuse of power. Even if a conviction in the Senate seems unlikely in the near future, just introducing the articles would deepen how cut off and isolated Trump has become within the government. One step automatically leads to the next. The judge's order requires a report to be sent to Congress, which then requires committee leaders to take action, creating an unstoppable chain of accountability. Experts on the Constitution have warned that if Trump tries to fire all the temporary officials at once, it could immediately start discussions about using the 25th Amendment among whatever cabinet members are still in place. The numbers are very tight because so many positions are empty. Behind the scenes, the scheming and planning has reached an extremely intense level. Senior military leaders at the Pentagon have reportedly given briefings to congressional leaders about the government's plans for staying functional during a crisis. They stress that the military's chain of command must stay intact, no matter what is happening in politics. The FBI is quietly adding extra security around the key officials who have turned against Trump, expecting possible threats from extremist groups that are still loyal to him. The fact that all these different branches of government are moving so quickly and in coordination suggests they all share the same belief. The president's position can no longer be maintained, and his ability to resist is rapidly weakening as he becomes more isolated. The current approach combines containment with isolation. They are containing the damage so it stays within the executive branch, while at the same time systematically cutting off Trump's ability to use the tools of presidential power. Efforts to limit the damage include emergency meetings with foreign ambassadors to reassure America's allies that the core functions of the U.S. government are still working properly. The big picture goal is to prevent any dramatic attempt by Trump to escape, whether that means legally trying to flee the country or physically fortifying the White House. They also want to lock in the defections by getting public commitments from the officials who resigned and giving them private promises of protection. As the crisis enters its second full day, the entire world is watching the United States with a combination of alarm and disbelief. Stock markets in Europe and Asia have opened with sharp drops. Futures for the Dow Jones suggest it could fall around 800 points when trading starts in New York. Currency traders are selling dollars and buying safer currencies like the Swiss franc and the Japanese yen. Bond interest rates are jumping because investors are adding extra charges to account for political risk at a level not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. International newspaper headlines are all asking different versions of the same question. Is American democracy falling apart in real time? NATO headquarters in Brussels put out a rare public statement this afternoon expressing deep concern about events that could affect security cooperation between the United States and Europe. Privately, European leaders are reportedly speeding up backup plans for a situation where it is unclear who holds presidential authority in the United States for weeks or even months. The British Foreign Office has quietly told British citizens in Washington to stay away from areas where protests are happening. Canada's Prime Minister called an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss what to do about border security if civil unrest in the U.S. gets worse. The damage to America's reputation is already serious. The American legal system, which has long been held up as an example for the rest of the world, is now being questioned by authoritarian governments who are eager to point out what they see as hypocrisy. China's state-run media has jumped on the chaos with gleeful opinion pieces, declaring that the so-called beacon of democracy has flickered out. Russia's foreign ministry put out a statement offering sympathy to the American people during this difficult period of internal conflict. Even countries that are normally close allies of the U.S. are adjusting their positions. France and Germany have postponed joint military exercises, saying they are uncertain about whether U.S. military command can be relied on right now. The risk of the U.S. becoming isolated on the world stage is growing with every passing hour. Several Latin American governments have postponed high-level visits, and partners in the Middle East are quietly switching their negotiations to career diplomats instead of political appointees. The financial markets face an additional threat of a sudden crash if the standoff drags on. Analysts have warned that long-term uncertainty could cause credit rating agencies to downgrade U.S. government debt, something that was last seriously considered during the 2011 debt ceiling crisis. Inside the country, the power struggle has clearly moved from politics to enforcement, from words to action, from loyalty to pure survival. Trump's inner circle has shrunk to just a few family members and extreme loyalists who are still barricaded in the White House residence. He continues to publicly fight back. A burst of posts on Truth Social late in the afternoon accused traitorous rhinos and corrupt judges of staging a coup. But those posts got fewer shares than his posts usually do, which suggests that even his base of supporters is starting to crack under the weight of reality. Emergency legal filings are flooding the courts. Requests to pause proceedings, emergency orders to stop enforcement, requests to remove certain judges from cases. But lower courts are rejecting them extremely fast, pointing to the urgency of the Supreme Court's original order. Trump has started issuing counter orders, directing temporary department heads to ignore orders to appear before Congress. But career government employees are openly refusing to follow those instructions, saying that doing so would violate the Hatch Act, which limits political activity by government workers, and would expose them to personal legal consequences. Global institutions are repositioning in response. The International Monetary Fund has put its economic predictions for the U.S. under special review. The United Nations Security Council is expected to hold informal discussions about the stability of the world's largest economy. Security adjustments are happening around the world. U.S. embassies in unstable regions are increasing their security forces, and American allies in the Asia-Pacific region are quietly strengthening relationships with other regional powers as a backup plan. The situation is speeding toward a small number of possible endings. Enforcement now looks unavoidable. It could come through contempt of court charges that lead to Trump being physically taken into custody, through Congress voting to remove him, or through the eventual use of presidential succession rules. A complete collapse is still a real possibility. If people loyal to Trump try to use force to resist, or if federal agencies split along political lines, a historic confrontation could happen that would be the ultimate test of whether the safeguards built into the American system of government can hold up against a president who keeps defying them. By nightfall on this second day, Washington feels like a city holding its breath. The White House is still lit up, but it is strangely still. There are no Marine guards standing at their usual posts, no presidential motorcade coming or going, just the occasional shadow of a person moving behind the bulletproof glass. The number of protesters has grown to thousands. They are split between those demanding Trump's immediate removal and a smaller, angrier group waving "Make America Great Again" flags and chanting against deep state traitors. There have only been small clashes so far, but the lines of police officers are getting thicker with every passing hour. This is no longer a story about one person. It is a test of the system itself, a test of whether the checks and balances that are centuries old can hold up against a president who refuses to accept their judgment. The resignations, the revolt in the Senate, the chain of legal consequences, the alarm from around the world, it all comes down to one single question. Can the machinery of American democracy still work when the person at the very top declares that its rules do not apply to him? The situation now comes down to three stark possibilities. The first is enforcement, meaning federal marshals or Secret Service agents carry out the court orders, potentially entering the White House grounds with military protection if necessary. The second is collapse, meaning a breakdown of government so severe that temporary officials activate emergency succession plans, leading to a chaotic transfer of power with competing claims about who is legitimately in charge. The third is a historic confrontation, meaning a long standoff that ends either with an impeachment conviction, removal through the 25th Amendment, or, most dangerously, the military stepping in to restore constitutional order. After this moment, nothing goes back to normal. Whatever happens will set a precedent that echoes for generations and reshapes how presidential power works, how party loyalty operates, and how much the public trusts its government institutions. Even if Trump eventually gives in or is removed, the scars will remain. The Republican Party will be broken in ways that are not easy to fix. The court system will be under attack from both sides. Voters will be even more divided than before. And allies around the world will never again automatically assume that the United States is stable. The situation has now passed the point of no return and is accelerating beyond anyone's ability to contain it. Every hour that goes by without a resolution makes things worse. More officials leave. Markets react more sharply. Warnings from around the world get louder, and government institutions become more determined to act. The machinery of law and government is in motion, and it does not stop for appeals, social media posts, or defiance. History is being written tonight. It is not being written through grand speeches or dramatic standoffs on the steps of the Capitol. It is being written through quiet resignations, whispered conversations in Senate meeting rooms, and the steady, grinding work of the legal system. The test is underway, and the system, bruised and strained but still working, is answering.